Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back for another series or episode analysis. Last of Us Season 2. We just finished episode 4. Ellie and Dina are now in Seattle. Before we pick up with their story, though, they have a bit of a flashback. Where we have a troop transport of Federal troops riding along. And this one guy, he's just blabbing, oh, this and such did this. It was all funny, blah, blah, blah. And then they smack the voters. Yeah. And the new recruit on the personnel carrier, he's kind of pauses for a minute after the story finishes, and he goes, why do we call them, why do you call them voters? And the guy that was telling the story says, I don't know, that's just what we call them. Then the commanding officer sitting on the end says, we took away their rights. That's what they used to do. But yeah, you can tell they're Fedra because they got the patch Fedra on it. So, and they're chatting and discussing. The vehicle stops, and they look behind them, and there's a whole bunch of people standing there. They're not armed or anything. So the commanding officer decides he's going to get out alone. To talk to them. But before he goes, he goes so far out towards them, and then he stops and he has the young troop or young member. He tells him, "You come with me." And he talks with the woman in front of all of them. And it's like they just introduce themselves. She goes, "You Isaac?" He goes, "You Hanrahan?" Or, I can't remember exactly what he called her, but it's something like that. And after they had both nodded, he turns back around, goes to the back of the vehicle, grabs 2 grenades, pulls the pin, tosses them in, closes the door, killing basically all the other troops inside. And then he goes back up to her and looks at her, and that young guy's scared to death. He don't know what's going on, and he looks at him and goes, now you need to make your decision. Yeah. But it turns out this is Isaac, which is a name that does come up quite often in the game, what I have watched of it played. Because I've not played the second one. I've not even played the first one. I've watched quite a bit of the first, a little bit of the second. But yeah. We start off getting introduced to Isaac. More or less. And how he turns his back on Fedra and joins the WLF. But, yeah. Next part we see is Ellie and Dina are in the city itself. They're looking about, and right now they're not having to see or confront anybody or anything. They're just looking about. They find Ellie sees a tank overgrown with plants. She kind of looks inside. When she first lifts the lid up, though, it makes, it has that big hollow when you have a big heavy piece of metal on a hollow substance. So it makes a racket when she opens it. But they're looking about, and there's no response, so Ellie continues to look inside, and she talks about 3 burned corpses. It's like Apollo 1 is the reference she makes. Talking about all the all 3 astronauts burning up on the rocket. But yeah. But essentially, they look out with binoculars and they see the tower with the satellite dishes. It says WLF. They're like, well, they've got to be there. And Ellie, of course, wants to go straight in. Dina's like, they're on a hill. It's broad daylight. We're on a horse. And Ellie agrees, yeah, well, I guess it probably would be better to wait until nightfall and go on foot. So they set up a base of to wait out the day. And it turns out it's this like old records store. The reason they choose it is because the front is 2 doors that open all the way out, which leaves enough room for their horse to come through. But yeah, they go ahead and go in, and they're looking about and looking through the old records, and they even have inside an old drum set and a number of old guitars. And this is where Ellie takes the guitar and playing an acoustic set of Take On Me by Aha. So that song reoccurs as it was in season 1. It's now in season 2. But yeah. But anyway, as nightfall hits. They're searching. I guess they come upon the tower or not far from it, but they enter this one building after it's become nightfall, and they're looking about, trying to stay quiet. They've got their guns drawn and their lights on, looking. But so far, no sign. Then they come across a room. Well, they first see a WLF body on the ground with several arrows in its chest. In their chest. Someone shot to death with arrows. And then they go further on and they come to this room where there's several WLF members hanging by their necks from the ceiling, and each one of them have been disemboweled, shall we say, their intestines hanging out. Yeah, this episode's a little more gruesome. We'll say that. But yeah. And while they're looking around, they suddenly get to a point in the room, and you can see on the wall it's got "Accept her love." Yeah. It's getting into some darker and gruesome parts. About that time, you can hear voices, the sounds. People say, "Get in there!" Da 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 da. And they open the door, and so suddenly Ellie and Dina duck real fast to hide. And the lights are shining in, and it's a bunch of WLF troops. They're looking around, and they're like, "Oh God!" And so they start doing a search. Ellie has managed to make her way upstairs to look for a way out without getting caught. But essentially, she's looking for a way out, and as she's doing so, a soldier comes up, and so she's kind of trying to hide in the corner, and he's looking around fairly oblivious because he's not even really paying attention. It's like he's not really watching what he's doing because he misses her completely, and she ends up attacking him, jumping on his back, trying to choke him out. And it turns out at that time, Dina comes up and shoots him in the head. Because I think at that point, he'd thrown Ellie off, or I can't remember exactly, but yeah. Anyway, boom, in the head. And you can hear everybody yelling, "Ah, and they're all coming upstairs, and Ellie's like, shoot the lamp, shoot the lamp. And she shoots through the window, and they knock it out. Ellie and Dina start going out the window and down the fire escape. They get out, and they manage to get away. But they end up being chased outside, and so they have to go into a transit tunnel because this crawl space getting in there, they're small enough to fit through, but the guys who are chasing them won't be able to, so they're in the underground now, in the transit tunnels. And but it isn't long. You can see the lights and hear the people, and you start seeing the torches being lit up and tossed into the room. And they're sitting there watching as all the torches get tossed in, and still trying to hide. And all of a sudden, you start hearing the sounds of the infected. They start making noises. They are waking up. Because it turns out it was enough heat, and they had the little one of their little sensors nearby, tendrils or whatever, that Dina's sitting there and she's going, she's just listening. She can hear it. 1, 2, there's another, and she does that and ended up 5, and she's got this real scared look on her face looking at Ellie. And yeah, what happens is we've got a big horde of infected that show up in the tunnels, and they are chasing down the WLF soldiers, attacking them. Dina and Ellie get into the subway transit train cars, but the infected are already at the sides of them, smacking it against them and everything. So yeah, and of course, as they chase through there, they have to get back on top cars, and they make their way out. And they get to like the ticket taking place before you go outside, and it's got the turnstile gates but they're like real rusted and stuck almost, so they have to keep beating on them to get through. And here starts coming the infected after them, and it dives at them, and it's on top of Dina, and she's trying to fight it back, and Ellie's reaching through the gates to try to push it back, and it leans down. Ellie sticks her arm through and takes the bite for Dina, and Dina's able to shoot it in the belly, and they was able to get her through the turnstile gates before the rest of them came, and they all kind of crowded into the gates, and they were getting stuck. So they were able to, Ellie and Dina were finally able to get away. and they find this place to hide. They were able to get inside, and Ellie locks up the door. And about that time, she turns around and sees Dina pointing a gun at her, with tears in her eyes. Because Dina is assuming Ellie will turn. She doesn't realize she's immune. So, yeah. Ellie says, "Look, I'm immune. I wouldn't believe me either. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go sit down in that chair there, bandage my arm, and go to sleep. You can keep the gun trained on me if you wish. And if I turn, shoot me. But I haven't yet." And so Ellie falls asleep for a few hours, and she's woken up by water dripping on her. And Dina once again turns the light on and has the gun still trained on her. And takes the bandage off of her arm where she had bandaged it, where she got bitten, and shows it. Finally, Dina gets up. She's like, I was so scared. I thought, there goes this whole future with us. I was self imagining. I was seeing that we might have. And I thought it was gone when you were bitten and everything. And then, of course, I can't remember if it's before or after, but I know Dina springs on her and says, "Look, I'm pregnant." Um, and explains, yeah, it's more than likely Jesse's. Because Ellie at one point says, "It is Jesse's, right?" She kind of gives Ellie this look, like, really? But they end up, yeah, spending their first intimate night together. Uh, Meanwhile, we get, again, I'm probably doing some of these things out of order, but I'm just trying to remember what I can remember. Isaac is interrogating this individual. You don't realize this because he just starts out lighting the burner on a stove. And he was talking about when he was younger, he imagined having um, these saucepans and stuff that are hanging up above the stove, and it's like he's just having a conversation, but he's telling the person he's interrogating, about it and everything. And he takes one of the saucepans down and he sets it on the burner for it to heat up. And he's telling them, copper conducts heat very well. It heats up fast, which is what the base of the pan is. He says, but with the steel handle, it doesn't conduct as fast through that. And then he takes the handle of the pan, and after it's heated up a little bit, and he walks over to the guy, and it's basically, he calls them scars. where they had the scars in their jaw. But it's one of them, and he's nude, chained to the wall, and you can already tell he's been beaten up pretty bad. But he tells him, says, "Now hold out your hand." And the Scar just does that, and Isaac takes the hot pan and while that's going on, outside the door, you've got two WLF members talking, and you could hear Isaac in there and hear the guy in there screaming and everything. But anyway, Isaac walks back to the stove and sets the pan down on the burner again to let it heat back up some more. And he's trying to get this information out of the guy, but the guy's like just acting more or less. You can tell he's hurting and everything, but he's not willing to give in his information. Isaac tells him to hold his other hand out, and the guy just does it. He's like, but he can't seem to get him to talk. And eventually, he said, I can't remember what was said, but he gets Isaac so angry. Isaac just drops the pan, pulls out a gun, and you could hear the shot, because then they flash back, or not flashback, but cut to outside of the door where the two guards are. So yeah. And the one guard says the Scar got what he deserved. Animals. But anyway, yeah. Dina and Ellie wake up. Ellie having spooned Dina. But yeah. They're doing the morning talk and everything, and kind of laughing, having fun, and talking about everything. And then all of a sudden you hear noise, and they reach into the backpack and pick up a radio they had picked up off one of the WLF soldiers earlier. And they're able to rush outside and look, and yeah. They see a cloud of smoke and the explosions that are going on. Hear the gunfire. So yeah. But they're pretty much. Ellie tries to tell Dina, says, "You need to stay alone. You need to stay here. I'll do this alone." And Dina's like, "No, we do this together." And that kind of ends the episode there. So yeah, their relationship actually is given more time to kind of build up and smolder a bit here in the TV show. Whereas in the game, I believe it was already past that point, so yeah. Um, but yeah, there there's so much going on, but their relationship has finally fully kicked off. They're officially more than friends. And we find out Dina is pregnant. So, yeah. But that's where we're at for the episode. Yeah. Good episode and went much quicker than I expected. It was just bam, bam, bam. Everything happening so fast, or felt like it. So yeah, um, another good episode. I think all of them have been pretty good so far. But yeah, we'll go ahead and end this here. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.